The concept of a Dead by Daylight pro scene is nothing new at all. For years now, there have been constant discussions amongst the community as to whether or not DBD should step into esports, whether it's a good idea or not, how the scoring would work, and what the rules would be, which in itself is already a bad indicator of things to come. With every other esports title, the teams simply play the game and whoever wins, wins. But it seems almost everyone agrees that if DBD ever were to have a pro scene, there would need to be arbitrary rules to keep things fair, like survivors not being allowed items or killers not being allowed add-ons beyond a certain tier, which in itself shows that the game is not fit for a pro scene if the base game is so unfair that it needs outside rules added to it. That being said, plenty of people have hosted their own unofficial DBD tournaments and a fair few have gone really well. So if things were handled correctly, I believe DBD absolutely could have a real esports presence. But what if I told you that BHVR themselves already tried their luck at creating a DBD pro scene years ago, and it failed miserably? Let me tell you the story of BHVR's official Dead by Daylight tournament and how it was so bad that it killed DBD's potential as an esport on the spot. The story begins 5 years ago, all the way back in 2018, and the state of Dead by Daylight was drastically different at that time. The nurse still hadn't had her add-on nerfs or cooldown nerfs yet, infinite loops still hadn't been fixed, and the newest killer was the clown. To put it simply, the game was in a much worse state than it is now, with horrendous balance and plenty of bugs players could exploit to ruin the game. Even back then, various people had already hosted their own tournaments, and depending on the rule sets, some of them were great while others were a joke. Even at that point, the community had already figured out that the various rules of each tournament was what determined if it was a success or a failure, and various different rule sets had been experimented with to varying degrees of success. Just for a few examples, some tournaments decided survivors were not allowed to bring in items but were allowed to use ones found in chests, or each perk could only be equipped on one player at a time to prevent 4 decisive strikes, 4 dead hards, 4 borrowed times and 4 unbreakables, which was the survivor meta back then, or killers were prohibited from camping, tunneling and sometimes even slugging. Keep in mind as well, as these tournaments would also be streamed, some of the rules were also aimed at keeping the tournament fun, engaging and interesting to watch, as viewers would have no interest in watching a nurse slug all 4 survivors for 5 minutes straight while they bled out. It seemed that after seeing the success some of these fan-made tournaments had, BHVR quite rightly wanted to take that opportunity to expand DBD into the esports scene, and set out to do so by arranging the very first official Dead by Daylight tournament as part of DBD's 2-year anniversary celebration. And they wanted this to be the real deal. They did everything in their power to ensure the entire player base knew about this tournament and were ready to tune in or even participate. Plastering it everywhere and even talking about it during dev streams, BHVR were drumming up some serious hype for DBD's venture into the esports world, with a whopping $15,000 up for grabs. According to the tournament's official page, which is still up after all these years, the tournament would be divided into different platforms, with PC, Xbox and PS4 first place winners getting $5,000 each alongside official DBD merch, officially written as swag, with second place winners getting just merch and no cash, and the third place winners getting, and I quote, nothing. But that cash prize alone was big. This tournament was no joke, and as a result, the community would take it very seriously. Of course, with such huge prize pools, official endorsements from BHVR, and advertising absolutely everywhere, the community was extremely excited and already wondering exactly how this would work. What rules would there be? Would there even be rules? If the devs thought their game was esports ready, then surely they'd have enough faith in the game's balance to not need arbitrary rules. Who would be casting it? Would it be a community mod? Someone on the balance team? Perhaps even Matthew Coty himself? Well, in the announcement they mentioned that the tournament would be organised by a group called Space eSports, not to be confused with the more popular and established Space Station eSports, which was a surprising move right off the bat, mainly because almost nobody had heard of this group before. Surely for an official tournament endorsed by BHVR themselves, they'd want a reputable, well-known team behind it. Opting to work with a relatively unknown team seemed to be setting things up for failure before they even started. And, unsurprisingly, It absolutely was. You see, the reason I said almost nobody had heard of Space Esports is because a small number of people did know them, as it turned out they had hosted a few of their own homemade, unofficial tournaments before. Of course, on a much smaller scale than this official one, but still, they weren't popular, but they certainly weren't completely unknown. Despite their popularity, or lack thereof, at the very least we can assume Behaviour vetted them out, checked their prior work, and decided that these guys have the sort of quality that they want representing DBD's grand entrance into the esports world, right? The tournament wouldn't have even began before it ran into its first major problem. They severely underestimated the number of teams that would sign up to participate in the tournament, and as a result, they just straight up stopped people from signing up. This announcement would be made in a tweet, which reads, "Due to the overwhelming response of the Dead by Daylight community registering for our tournaments, our administration team is going to shut down signups within 24 hours because we have exceeded the expected number of teams." This, of course, upset many people who were still in the process of organising their teams and wanted to participate too. But the blows didn't stop there. By the cutoff point, a whopping 174 teams had signed up, and it turns out that underestimated doesn't even begin to describe it, because how many slots were available in this tournament? 16. That's right, an almighty 158 teams would be robbed of their chance to even try winning the tournament. Well, they were hardly robbed of their chance if they lost their qualifiers, you may say. And nope, there were no qualifiers. The 16 participating teams would be hand-picked, and the 158 remaining teams were kicked out without even having the chance to play a single match. With this tournament already having 2 major mishaps weeks before it even started, there's no way it can go worse than that, right? Well, if you've watched my channel before, you already know that if it's behaviour we're talking about, things always can and will get worse. On the sign up page, players would be greeted with the rule set for this, once again, official DBD tournament. So let's see what rules they chose, shall we? Of course, the most important rules for any esports tournament at the top, a long list of countries that were simply banned from participating in the tournament, including Zimbabwe and a misspelled Belarus. So, after making sure that the country you live in isn't banned from even entering, we can then move on to the actual rule set for this tournament, which states, no perks, items, offerings or add-ons. This is a bare bones tournament, all skill, with the exception of items found in-game through chests. Alright, keeping things nice and simple and easy to follow. That way people won't be confused as to which things are banned and which things are okay. Although I'm not sure that clarifying it's all skill was really necessary. The rest of the rules state that matchups will be best of 3. Each kill is 1 point for the killer's team and each escape is 1 point for the survivor's team. Overtime will keep going until one team gets a point lead, and each team is allowed 1 restart if a player disconnects within a minute of the match starting. Unless a survivor has been hooked or a gen has been done, then the match will just continue. Body blocking is okay unless it's a killer blocking the basement stairs, fair enough, or a survivor blocking the killer from hooking? Really? So much for all skill. They also specifically state that face camping is a viable strategy and thus is allowed. Glad to know that face camping is skillful but taking hits for your teammates isn't. Thanks, behaviour. Last but not least, there was a rule for the hatch, as back in the day the hatch was very different to how it is now. It says in the event of a hatch standoff, whoever finds it first gets the point. Remember this rule for later. The only other rule was, this tournament will be on Coal Tower, not the entire realm of Macmillan, not just Coal Tower for 1 round, no, 1 map and 1 map only for the entire tournament. So now we know what the rules were, I think it's also worth noting what the rules weren't. Normally in bare bones tournaments like this, each round has a predetermined killer. For instance, killers in the semi-finals will have to be Wraith, and killers in the finals will have to be Huntress, etc, etc. This is for the sake of variety, as otherwise people would only pick the strongest killers, and viewership would suffer as people would be bored of seeing the same characters getting played for an entire tournament. Well, I guess this means that behaviour had enough faith in their balance to mean that we'd see a good variety of killers then, right? The 22nd of June 2018 finally rolled by, which marked the beginning of the tournament. Day 1 would be the PC tournament, followed by PS4 and then Xbox on the days following. And upon opening the stream, viewers would be greeted with,
It's been a minute, dude. I'm happy to be back though.
But I gotta say, it's kind of like riding a bike. Like to be honest, me and Diz, honestly, like we haven't done one of these in a long time, but it's like, hey, I'm ready. So we're gonna get this thing off. Welcome everybody. Shout out to all who are here right now, and it's great. This is great. This is great. Let's go.
The first thing that comes to mind is just how awful these microphones are. The guy without the face cam does sound 10 times worse than the guy with the cam, but even his sounds pretty bad too, which is already a major red flag as casters talk almost non-stop when casting gameplay, and nobody is going to have a good viewing experience listening to mics that horrendous the entire time. But maybe their casting skills are just that good that Behavior thought it would make people stick around regardless. We'll look at that when the matches start. The other thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is the visual design of this screen. While the background looks good, remember that for later, the rest of it looks like something you'd see from a novice Twitch streamer that's only just designed their first OBS scene, not something meant to represent DBD's grand entrance into the esports scene. I mean, look at the team names. They've got white on white and red on red. Even just flipping the two of them around would have made a big difference to their legibility. Oh, and the stream's lagging and freezing before we've even had our first match. Remember when I said things can and will get worse? When we finally managed to get to the pre-game lobby, you might notice the screen glitching out and going crazy. This is because the host had a controller plugged in and was moving an analog stick at the same time as the mouse, causing DBD to rapidly switch between mouse and analog modes over and over again. In the very first match of the tournament, we can already see the lack of rules setting the scene for the entire tournament ahead. 1 nurse, 4 Claudettes on Coal Tower for almost the entire tournament.
Squadette, classic team comp that we've had before. It's it's pretty normal for teams to pick all the same character in order to try to confuse the killer.
So it's no surprise to them that this would happen. They knew that this tournament would be almost exclusively nurses and Claudettes and didn't once consider how that might affect the viewing experience. And already a lack of professionalism by having no restrictions on usernames, allowing inappropriate usernames to participate in the tournament. But not only that, the casters even went out of their way to read the name out loud.
Briefcase Wingster. What a name.
Again, this would be okay if this wasn't an official tournament. If this was League, Overwatch, or even Smite, a username like that would not have been allowed to participate. And the meme that I'm sure a lot of you have already heard of was born within the very first match of this tournament.
Juby, off the Valhalla, struggle bug mode was already underway.
For some reason, throughout the entire tournament, anytime a survivor is about to die or get sacrificed, they called it being sent to Valhalla, a saying that quickly got on everyone's nerves. When asked about it, they said it was an inside joke their group makes. What? This is meant to be professional casting for an official DBD tournament. Don't be making inside jokes on the job, especially since it's an inside joke, none of the thousands of viewers would get it. This joke would be repeated for the entire tournament, and I think now would be a good time to mention just how long the tournament would last. Keep in mind there were no breaks or anything, so this was all in one sitting. 12 entire hours. That's right, 12 hours straight of the same killer against the same survivors with the same loadout on the same map and the same joke. Absolute madness. Speaking of jokes, their next infamous joke would arise in the one single Myers match of the tournament, calling his ability
Already able to get the Super Saiyan level 2 right there.
Followed by an amazing breakdown of how his ability works.
And it's very important for Michael Myers to take the time to build up his meter, because it's going to make him a better killer, right?
And keen viewers might have been piecing together a picture here. A lot of these things are not things that an actual DBD player would say, starting from the small things like calling gens Jennies, all the way up to saying that sacrificing someone is sending them to Valhalla. But this pitiful breakdown of Myers is probably what sealed the deal in thinking, these people have no idea what they're talking about. So if you were already suspecting that these people have little to no experience playing DBD, you're on the right track. But remember this for later, as it's not the last time the caster's experience comes into question. Okay, we have bad mic quality, bad stream graphics, bad rules and annoying jokes. But at the very least, we won't have casters making stupid sounds down the mic, will we?
Knife in the air. Currently just trying.
And even with Myers hitting
Stage 3 Super Saiyan,
he still ends up with a grand total of 0 kills. At the very least, this whole show had behaviour's approval and a lot of money behind it, so surely they had graphics made for each team ahead of time, right? No, instead they're going to type it out letter by letter, live, on screen for everybody to see. At the very least, the audio balance between the game and the main caster's voice was good. It would be a shame if he randomly decided to triple the game's volume and make it way louder than his voice.
Into the game we go. Get this volume cranked up so you guys can hear the nurse howling and screeching through the woods right now.
A little later on in the tournament and we find ourselves a huntress. And it's not long until she gets her first hook and immediately proceeds to face camp that hook for the remainder of the match. Thank God for those all-skill rules. Pulling the caster's experience with DBD back into question, one of the casters makes this comment about the Trapper.
And he's fast as shit. He's so fast.
Which is simply wrong. He is the default speed, and at the time of the tournament, he had nothing in his kit that gave him any form of mobility. All of the things I've just mentioned were simply some of the most noteworthy incidents of the stream. But believe me, there were plenty more examples, and all of the Twitch chat was sick and tired of this absolute mockery. There were so many better options for casters, and chat was now asking to replace the casters with better ones, which the casters saw and did not like at all. And instead of remaining professional, they immediately went into a rant.
You guys should understand this is your community, so what you guys represent in chat as a community, it's all on you. Like, it doesn't really hurt. It's like, it doesn't make me feel bad to know that a community is salty or not. It just reflects on your own guys' community. Honestly, so like, I'm glad to see a lot of these people enjoying it, and then all those who have negative things to say, thank you for being here. Slam that follow, hit the notification, so you can come back and tell me how bad. Like, you're contributing to chat. I don't think people understand, like, by typing in negative stuff, keep it coming. Like, that is analytics, that is stats. You're a member viewing in our audience, contributing to the community. Keep it up. Thank you so much for being here. Slam that follow, come back tomorrow, same time, and you can keep telling me how much I suck, because, hey, you guys keep the chat lit. Keep the chat lit. And I'm enjoying it.
And yet, we are still not done. As we get our second and last hillbilly of the tournament, one of the casters has a grand moment of realization.
That's one thing that I personally hadn't thought about before we actually started doing these tournaments, was people using the chainsaw dash, not necessarily for trying to hit people, but actually just using it for, like, increased mobility. Kind of the way the nurse does.
That's right, these casters for DBD's first official tournament had never considered using the Hillbilly's dash for mobility. For any of you watching who don't play DBD, that's literally the main point of his ability. More time passes, and after the hosts break their own rules by giving a team 2 restarts despite the rules saying only 1, we get to one of the 2 major screw-ups of this tournament. Oh yeah, everything before, that was nothing compared to this. The first of which, I'll just let you look for yourself.
And it's been so wonderful to watch so many incredible DBD players come together, the thousands of hours that people have accumulated in this game, as we see a nurse dabbing on somebody there. It's been wonderful to watch, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of.
Thank you.
Yep. Blatant lag switching. So surely that's grounds for instant disqualification, right? Nope, the match just gets a restart. Keep in mind the game was peer-to-peer back then, and the killer would be the host of every match, so lag switching back then was seriously that powerful. Not only do they not get disqualified, they end up making it to the final, facing off against the absolutely legendary D-Pip squad. With things staying extremely close, this one kill or escape would either win the entire tournament for the DPIP squad or cause it to go into overtime. With only one survivor still alive, the old hatch mechanics in full force, and Marth on his nurse, let's see how it ends.
Hey, we're both down here. He needs to grab one of us. That is fantastic. Sailing play, ultimately.
It was a very dangerous situation for the tournament. It very well could have been that.
Who found this first?
Oh no.
That's the question.
Oh no. I think he was standing on it and he hit him. And as soon as he went down, he crawled through the hatch.
Marth clearly finds the hatch first, then hits the survivor to end the game. As the rules state, whoever finds the hatch first gets the point, and there's no denying Marth was there first. And yet, the hosts classed it as a point in favour of the survivor, as it's not a hatch standoff until the hatch is open. Therefore, there was no standoff and the survivor simply escaped. Nowhere in the rules was this defined prior, and this clarification had to be made up after the fact. Absolutely unbelievable. The final rolled into overtime, and eventually the tournament monsters won. Despite their prior lag switching and Marth blatantly winning the hatch standoff, thus starting the hashtag Marth was robbed and calls of favoritism, with this same team getting carried to their win by multiple illogical rulings made in their favour. And remember that background I mentioned earlier? Pretty much the only good looking thing about the stream? Well, turns out that was stolen artwork that they used without the original artist's permission, and initially didn't even give credit to, until the artist publicly expressed their displeasure with the situation. It's hard to say who's to blame for how truly terrible this tournament was. Was it Space eSports' fault for agreeing to take on a job that they knew they were nowhere near ready for? Or was it Behavior's fault for choosing such a terrible team to represent them without looking at their prior content and noticing that this was not the sort of poor quality that you wanted to lead DBD's charge into the eSports scene? Space eSports continued operating for a few years after this, describing themselves as one of the most recognized gaming tournament influencers in North America, a statement which would get them mocked heavily. They eventually deleted their Facebook and Twitter pages after a bombardment of bad reviews and negative comments due to their mishandling of the DBD tournament, and they eventually shut down altogether, with their last documented tournament taking place in 2019 for a game called Evolve, before the organisation was shut down for good. Their website is no longer online, and all operations seem to have been long gone for years.